the topic for today is the publishing checklist. We released this some weeks ago with a round table from a number of creators that I thought was really cool. We all talked about, how we approach publishing worlds. And following that roundtable, a number of people requested that they would love to have more time to go more deep on the checklist and just talk about it. So this is a follow-on session to go through it. Early up in chat, Tawalu put a link to the publishing checklist. That was just a couple of minutes ago. So if you could scroll up, you can find it, which is a place to download it. So I'll give a little bit of context on it, and then we'll just kind of talk through the checklist. I'll have a bit of content, and then we'll open up some time for a Q&A and discussion. So okay, let's start off with what the checklist is and what it's for. So we spent some time talking to a number of creators to hear their best feedback on, what do they do and what you can call the last mile. So when you go to launch a world and you're getting really close to the end, what are the things to think about to make sure you have a really good launch? And so if you think about it, when you're at the very end of a world, there are definitely certain problems you should not be having. Like you should not be wondering, what is the genre? Right? What is the genre is the kind of question you should answer early on in development. Or what is the core mechanic? Or what is the core loop? Or who's your target audience? A lot of these questions are things you want to answer earlier in development. There will be future resources coming out in future talks that address some of these earlier problems that you face when making a world. What's the genre? What's the theme? Who's it for? What's your technical complexity? What are the biggest risks? How do you manage them? A lot of those early questions, which are called pre-production. Stay tuned. There will be future resources for that. So today, we're going to talk about the last stages of production. The way I like to think about it is pre-production is when you answer all of the questions that could prevent the project from succeeding. So pre-production is when you say, is this possible? Is it possible in Horizon? Can the team build it? Can you fit it in the frame rate? Is it fun? Is it doable? And so if you've ever started a world where you're like, I want to build a jet ski racing game, and then you start off and ask, are jet skis possible in Horizon? Let me prototype one first. That is a pre-production phase. And so the idea of pre-production is to ask, what are all the things that could prevent this from being completed as a good thing, as a good product? So generally when you have confidence of, hey, this is buildable, we can build this, it's gonna be fun, we know the scope, we have a good sense of it, you move into the production phase, which is really about building the thing. And so as I mentioned earlier, there will be future resources to come that give more information on the pre-production stage. So when you move into production, you're building all the levels, you're building all the art, you're working through all the details, the polish, the UIs, all of that subtlety that really brings a world to life. You then get to kind of the last stage where you generally have it done, working, you've done a lot of good play tests, and you're like, cool, I'm almost done. I think I'm very close. Let me start thinking about launch. Let me think about what are those remaining things to being done. And so what we have today is a checklist to help you look at answering the questions of, am I done, or what does it take to get there? This is the first version of a checklist. Hopefully in the future there will be iterations on this, as we get more feedback on what would make it better. And so again, the checklist was put together by talking to a bunch of folks about what are their tricks and what makes it the most useful for them. So when you go to this link, you'll be able to download this checklist, and the idea is that you can clone it for each world that you create. And there's nothing wrong with you cloning this worksheet earlier in the world production. So at any point in time when you're working on a world, you could clone this worksheet and start to work on it. And so the worksheet is divided into 3 sections: design, production and marketing. So let me give a little bit of context on those before we go into the details. So design is all about the question of, is your world good on paper? That's really what you should think about design is answering. So if you were to explain your world, the concept, the theme, the core loop, the interactions, what do you do there? Why do you do them there? How do you interact with other people? Why do you want to come back? All of the answers are good. That's what it means to have a good design. Category number 2, production, is about, did you manufacture a good thing? So assuming that your on-paper description is good, is your implementation of it good? So if you were going to make, I don't know, some kind of, game where people are fighting on ice and the ice breaks and they fall through and you have all these core mechanics, it might be good on paper, but if the game freezes and locks up and players randomly fall through the floor, you may have not produced something very good. So production is asking, did you build a good version of the thing you designed? Design is this a good thing on paper? And then finally, the marketing bucket is about the things you do to let people know that this thing exists. All of the stuff about, advertising that it exists or building a Discord community, all of those things. For those of you that don't know, most people think of the word marketing as just like, banners and billboards. But marketing really just asks, it's how you engage with your core market, which means the users, the people. And so anything you do to advertise to them, to organize them, to talk to them, to send them messages, to create a community space, all of that stuff is marketing. And so this third bucket is then all of the stuff you do outside of the world itself to help it be successful. So the next thing you'll notice is that right here in the very top left, where it says Stone Cove Escape, so I actually cloned this and named it after a world I'm currently working on. This is a world that I released some years ago that I've been working on converting to mobile. So notice, that means a launched world is now going through a major update. I'm converting it to mobile. That means I had to modify some of the puzzles. I'm adding hints. I'm doing real work, which means I'm back in the production phase. I'm producing content. And so I have taken my own version of this checklist to track where is my own readiness on this world. And so as I go through the content here, I will show you what I've filled out for an actual world that I am working on. So this is page 2 of the checklist. And if you'll notice, this is the first bucket. This is design. It's the first of the 3 we just talked about. So we can see for each of these 3 areas, there are 3 separate pages: a marketing page, a production page, and a design page. And we'll talk about these in a bit more detail. So before we go into the details themselves, let me just explain the structure of the document. And actually, just to make sure, is everyone seeing the design page right now? Just want to make sure there's no issues. Give me some thumbs up if you currently see a table with the word design on top. Awesome, great, okay. So this is the design page. And so what you'll notice on this doc is there's a column explaining, okay, what do we mean by design? So if you look at this doc on your own, you can see this definition. This is like what I said, it's the is your world good on paper? Here's the explanation of, did you manufacture a good thing? And then, are you engaging people appropriately? So there are those definitions for you to read. And then you'll see for each of those, there's a column explaining the purpose of this area. So we can see here, ensure the experience is likely to have high engagement and retention, minimizing the likelihood of bounciness and churn. And again, this is on paper. Whereas production says, verify the design has been implemented at a high quality bar. Did you make the thing? And so we can see for each of these 3 pages, there's a description of the area and why it's important. Additionally, there's a column which says addressing, that is trying to help you think about which problems each of these areas solves, just to kind of help think about it. Oh, I saw someone in chat just say, do we get this PDF? Yep, it's in the link that Tawalu posted. This right here, just to bump it. So if you click the link in the thing I just bumped in chat, that is the where you can get this checklist. Okay, and yeah, please download it, clone it right now. Feel free to fill it out as we go. So all right, so now we see there's a column called addressing. So this is just trying to help you think about the problem area that this item helps with. So for this first row in this doc, we can see that it's addressing bounce. So I'm curious, again, participation. Can anyone in the chat tell me, what is bounce? Now this is not a thing about trampolines or rabbits. I'm curious, does anyone know? I see someone typing. What do we mean by bounce? Good, lots of people typing. Please participate. By the way, for those of you that don't know, even if like this seems silly, by actively writing out answers like this, studies show that you're more likely to remember things and understand them if you actively participate. So anytime I ask a question, even if you know the answer, please, all of you, like write the answer. That strengthens memory and recall. All right, so let's see what we got. So I see if people leave quickly, people who come into the world and leave very quickly. Yep, yeah, I love that. And so the way I like to think about it is it's literally if you're hosting a party and someone comes up to you and says, yo, I'm gonna bounce, right? That is what bounce means, is like they leave. And in particular, when we talk about bounce and product development, we mean leaving quickly. So it's almost like they treat your world like a trampoline. They came and they're gone, like just boom, quickly gone. And so this item is saying, okay, let's look at bounce. And at least on this checklist, we can see there's two main items trying to really frame and talk about bounce. And again, let's get some audience participation. How important do you think it is in a world to prevent bounce? On a scale from 1 to 10, so come on everyone in chat, like let's see lots of people type. From 1 to 10, how important, where 10 is the highest, is it to make sure people don't bounce? Great, I'm seeing very high numbers. It's a 10. Because if everyone comes and then they leave quickly, it doesn't matter anything else your world does. It just doesn't matter, right? And so it's important that they're there long enough to see what you offer, what those of the world do, to get a sense to play it. Because if a person comes, they're there very briefly and they leave, it's very unlikely they're gonna ever come back. They're just like, yeah, I tried it once, wasn't for me. And so bounce is super important. And so we can see there's another column all the way on the right, going a little out of order here, but that says priority. And so we can see this is marked as fundamental. Let me turn on my light, it's getting dark. And so fundamental basically means you got to do it. And so I don't mean you have to do it. Like, you guys are allowed to do what you want. You can completely ignore this doc. You can do parts of it. But the recommendation of myself and the other creators I interviewed when we produced this doc all agreed that this is super important. And so bounce, addressing it is fundamental, in particular this problem, which we'll get into in a second. We can also see there are some things in here that are listed as ideal. I like to think of ideal here meaning you should have a really, really, really good reason to not do this. That's what ideal means. And there's one more thing you'll see in here, which is listed as optional, which means, okay, there's a lot of good reasons to not do it. Probably should think about it, but you don't have to. And we'll get through there again. All right. One then thing to say before we get further in is the goal of this talk is to give you all context on this checklist and make sure you understand how to use it as a tool. For each of these rows, there could be a whole talk just on one of these rows. And so if you do have specific questions about them, like feel free to put it in chat. I'll try to offer some ideas, but just be aware I can only spend so much time answering for each of these rows because they're each big, large items. But there is a general sense in this doc of some hints on what to do. So, okay, so let's look at bounce. So for this first item, which is flagged as bounce, it says user playtests have shown. Okay, this is super important. What this means is that when you look at this checklist for all of these items on this first page, you don't just sit down, close your eyes, and say, how do I feel about my world? The proper way to use this checklist is that you want to guarantee each of these by doing user playtests. A user playtest means you bring real humans into your world, not your best friends who just go, oh my God, I love it. You bring real people and you let them do the world the real way, which means you just observe them and you let them play. And so on this page, it's saying that all of these items are recommended that you verify them by play tests. Likewise, on the second page, it's going to suggest that you do play tests with users, or you can just do them kind of with yourself and your other dev buddies. I'm seeing in chat, where do you find real people? Yeah, every business in the world building a product has to deal with this problem. So as a business, which you all are, you can build a following so that anytime you release a new world, you can say to your current user base, hey, does anyone want to test this? You can post on Discord or Instagram Reels or places that there's a test coming and you're looking for folks. You can use the available Discord channels. There's lots of different places. You can even go into Central. But yes, you as a creator will need to do some work to find people. And by the way, let me just make an important comment here. I'm surprised how often creators will spend 100 hours making a world and then 0 hours finding people to play test it. Like, if you're putting that much time into a world, really make sure you put time into the stuff that really helps you verify how well it is doing. So, okay, so on the first page, we can see we recommend these things are done via testing with actual people you intend to do the world, real users. Page 2 can be internal and real users, both. And then page 3 is just making sure you have these prepared. So again, just showing you the structure of this doc is telling you how to think through this. Okay, so now that we understand the structure of the doc, and again, if you have any questions whatsoever, just put them in chat and I'm watching. So, okay, so this first item, we are supposed to use play tests to guarantee this. It's meant to burn down, to address bounce, people leaving quickly. It's written as fundamental, meaning really take this seriously. So what does it say? People can identify the purpose, genre, and value proposition, the thing they get out of it, of the world within their first 30 seconds without any help assistance. Okay, what does without any help assistance mean? I've seen people all the time where they ask me to come play test their world, and then them as the creator are actively talking to me and giving me hints and help and, hey, try this. Did you read that sign? Did you do this? If you as a creator have to talk through your testers how to play the world, what happens when you, the creator, aren't there? They bounce. So how do you do this? You bring people into a world and you don't say anything. You just say, hey, everyone, welcome. I'm just here to observe you. Have fun. And you be quiet. And you watch. Do they look around? Do they go to the right places? Do they understand? Or do they sound confused? And you take notes. And you just watch. And you resist all of the urges you have to give a hint, to help, to talk. You just observe. Now let me remind everyone, here we're talking about when you're getting near the end of development, because we're talking about a launch checklist. If you're in the early stages of prototyping a world, then yes, it's okay to bring people in when there's no instructions and say, hey, let me explain to you how the cars work, and then try racing them. Early in development, it is okay if you are helping and hinting. But when you get to development, every time you are talking to your users to help them means you are addressing a fundamental flaw in your world that will cause it to fail when you aren't present. So if you look at this, because this is for a real world, on my checklist, I have the options, ready for launch, needs work, and doesn't apply. So for me personally, I put ready to launch. For this world, Stone Cove Escape, I've brought in enough people where I say literally nothing. I just say, hey, thanks for coming. I'm just going to stand off to the side and be quiet, have fun. And that's it. And then I watch. And they quickly understand this is an escape room. I mean, it has escape in the title. They quickly understand the goal. If you go into this world, when you spawn in, there's like 6 words of text. That's it. You know, it says, find the path to the sky or something similar. Cool. Established a goal quickly. Most of the world is locked behind a door. So you're in a small space, not much to do. And so I'm confident when people show up, they're like, all right, we got to find a path into the sky. We're stuck until we open this door. It's a puzzle world. Cool. If they don't like puzzle worlds, at that point, they're probably going to leave. I'm okay with that. And if they do like puzzle worlds, they're probably ready to get started. And then most importantly in this world, they should solve their first puzzle within a minute. Because I think if they don't solve a puzzle quickly enough, they're going to bounce. Okay, so again, I could all day long give a talk just on this one item. And I don't really want to make this talk all about going through these one by one by one. If people do want to do deep dives in the session, in deep dive sessions in the future, let me know. We're always watching the Discord to see what people are talking about and to understand what resources would be the most useful. And so definitely, I ask all of you, before you just start asking for more talks, please read this whole doc. It has the expertise of so many great creators all baked into it. Read the doc, fill it out, and go try to do some good play tests. If I could actually impart on all of you one piece of advice or one thing to incept in your mind, it would be that you are running really bad play tests. I don't even know who you are or what you're doing. You're probably running bad play tests. And you can learn so much from watching people truly play your worlds, knowing how to observe them, ask the right questions, hint the right things. And you'd be surprised how many creators launch stuff with obvious flaws just because they didn't play test at all or play tested poorly, or they aren't good at taking feedback. It's another issue, is most creators don't actually want to know what's wrong with their world, even if they tell you they do. All right, let's look at one more of these, and then we'll jump down to the next bucket. So let's look at, and you can see there's actually a second issue related to bounce here. Great, there are multiple things related to bounce. All right, let's look at these 5 rows, which are all calling out churn. This is not about butter. So again, audience participation. I want to see lots of people commenting. Come on, impress me, blow me away with how many people respond to this. What is churn? What is churn? What is important? Or offer a tidbit. I'm just going to pause until there's like 20 responses. No joke. I'm just going to sit here quietly. So come on. Boom, boom, boom. What's churn? Give me your thoughts on churn. I see 3 serious remarks. 17 to go. 4. Oh no, that's 3, 4. All right, 16 to go. Come on. What's churn? What do you think about it? Let's get all these comments in. All right, we're up to 5, 15. Let's keep going. Keep going. Come on, give me lots of thoughts. What's churn? Why does it matter? Yep. Come on, everyone. Yep. Keep going. See, some people have issues with sound. If someone could put some tidbits in the chat on ways to address sound, please do. All right, let's get a handful more comments. I love this. Keep typing. Remember, participation increases memory. I'll get 2 more, and then I will continue. All right, come on, 2 more people. Tell me what's churn, or a thought on churn, or a hint for churn. All right, 1 more. 1 more person's thoughts on churn, and then I'm going to unpause. Okay, great. All right, lots of people's thought on churns. All right, so let's kind of read what we got here. So when someone comes into your world only one time, keeping them in your focused game loop, how many people come and go, when they stop playing the game, how many people come to your world without knowing how many people go through the world, how fast people get tired of your game, depends on how many people come, turnaround time, people playing once and not return, satisfaction. All right, so lots of good thoughts here. These things all matter, right? You're all pointing out things that matter for making a really good world. But let's talk about what the word churn itself actually means. So churn is what happens when a person decides to no longer engage with your world after they had been. So a person who comes to your world and doesn't really ever truly engage and leaves is what we call bounce. A person who engages for a while and leaves is what we call churn. That's the difference. So both bounce and churn are about a person leaving. Bounce is very quickly before they even tried. Churn is after they tried for a while. So let's just get a quick vote from folks. I want you to write the word churn or bounce in the chat. A player comes to your world, they see an intro sign, there's way too much text, they're overwhelmed, and they leave. All right, so tell me, was that bounce or churn? Great, that's a user bounced. Okay, listen to this example. A person comes to your person versus person shooter, plays for 30 minutes, does a pretty good job, wins every round, never feels challenged, so they never come back to the world again. Churn, correct. So churn is really about a doesn't come back, but engaged. And then, what do you call a person that doesn't churn for a long time? Anyone know? So if a person doesn't churn, they keep coming back, what do we call them? Retention. Correct. So we can see right here this word retention. Retention is about how you keep a person from churning for a long time. So if you think about it, bounce is literally about seconds versus minutes. Churn is about like half hours versus hours. Retention is weeks and months. So it's this progression. Okay, so between bounce, churn, and retention, if they're all broken, which one do you fix first? Let me see in chat. Which do you fix first? Bounce, churn, or retention? Bounce. If people leave after 5 seconds, it doesn't matter if it's good after 6 months. So once you have them staying for a little while, maybe 10, 20 minutes, then you can deal with the fact that they never come back. Churn. And if you have them coming back a number of times, then you can deal with the fact that they don't come back after a week. Retention. Okay, so going back to my version of this worksheet. So first, don't cove escape. So churn. So this says the world engages just a single person or any other number of players less than the whole number until others show up, right? So imagine you go to a world and it's like a PvP, a team shooter, and like you read all the signs and you're like, oh, the game sounds good. I understand how to play. I'm like ready. Okay, you haven't bounced. But then it's a 6-person game and there's only 4 people there. You're going to wait. You're going to wait. You're like trying to engage. You're interested. And then you churn. So remember, a churn is when you lose someone who's interested, who's engaged, who's played. And so in this world, you can solve the whole world alone. And so you don't have to worry about the has enough players problem. And so this row specifically is talking about the ability to even handle a single player. So if it's a 10-person game, you got to have a lobby. You got to have something for them to do. Because if one person shows up, waits 30 seconds and leaves, and then a second person shows up, waits 30 seconds and leaves, you're just never going to have enough people for the game to get started. And if it's a 10-person game and the game's never starting, every single person's going to churn. And so like, this might feel weird, but if you have a 5-person game, bring in only 2 people with just 2 randos and see how long they'll stay and interact and play. And is it long enough that you think it might take for a 3rd person to show up and then a 4th? Okay, and so we can see for this one, I have it ready to launch. Okay, so finally, let's look at retention. Now notice retention here is written as ideal. The reason retention is written as ideal is because some people write and make worlds that are not meant to be played 5,000 times. Like I build escape rooms that you might come do once, you might come back a second time for a speed run. but you're just not expected to come back a month later. There is content where it's once one and done or a few and done, and so retention is not a must. However, I will say a retentive world, if you can build one, is a much stronger approach, because if people can keep coming back and playing, you can survive and thrive off of the same people versus constantly needing more and more and more. And so what we can see here for retention is it says, if there is a progression system, such as leaderboards, achievements, or unlocks, the milestones are clearly outlined and the players are able to gauge their progress, like how far are they. Non-games are encouraged to have progression systems as well. And so I put needs work because I want to build a speedrun leaderboard, insert some achievements, and probably insert some secret achievements that are hinted at for some people who might want to come back and find them. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next page. Again, I'm monitoring chat. So if anyone has questions about the content, let me know. Remember, we could deep dive for an hour on any of these rows. So the goal here is to make sure this checklist itself makes sense. The real thing for you to do is go fill it out and do play tests and really think about if your play tests are really proving these out. A single play test is probably not enough to really prove any of these out. Okay, so let me move on to production. And so we can see in production, we're trying to look at bugs and polish, right? And so like this says, the main mechanics in core loop do not have any significant known bugs or glitches, right? So like if you're trying to launch a world, you can't be like, oh, sometimes the cars randomly stop driving. If the main mechanic of your world is racing, that's a main mechanic is drive car, and randomly the cars just stop driving, you probably shouldn't launch that world. That's like a real issue. And it will likely lead to bounce or churn, both of them. And so here in this doc, we can see there are bugs in polish, and there's also stress testing, just making sure it works well when there's lots of people in there, performance, and then thinking about mobile. So as an example, in this one, I have one needs work. It says all text, signs, and UI elements are checked for proper spelling, grammar, and music and effects. The reason this needs work is I have a hint system, and I've literally not implemented the hints for all the puzzles yet. So like there are some puzzles where you open the hint system and it's just blank. I've not finished the text, the signs for my world. By the way, one thing I'll say here is if you'll notice, the only thing you can do in this doc is do drop downs. I think it'd be very helpful if there were an additional column where you could actually type notes. That you can't do that today. Maybe a future version of this doc will have an extra column. If a bunch of people start using it and that feels like it's missing, that would be good encouragement to make a version 2 of this doc. All right, final last thing before I just move over fully to Q&A. So all right, finally, marketing. So marketing, we can see there's things about making sure you have clear goals. You're thinking about your promotional content, how you engage with people socially. Are you doing any press? How do you get your first users? And do you have plans for after launch? And you'll notice for some of these, I've marked them as doesn't apply. I have some that are ready, and I have some that needs work. In marketing, you'll notice more of them are optional. You don't have to do a press tour. You don't have to launch updates after you launch the world. However, it's good to have as many of these as possible. And again, in these rows are written things to help you think about it. And so the way to use this worksheet is at some point when you're in the production stage of your world, you're getting far enough along, clone this doc, save it with the world name, fill out this the status column, and then keep trying to get it so that everything either says ready to launch or doesn't apply. And if you make significant changes like, oh, this thing's really not working, let's change it, that means you need to reproof things to yourself and go back to needs work. So if you've said the core mechanics have no bugs and then you fundamentally change the core mechanic, it needs to go back to needs work. And you got to redo your play tests to find out if it's good. So all right, so that's the core of what this checklist is and what's in it. Hopefully this just gave you some good context of things to think about. Hopefully you will go spend a bunch of time with this. If you try to use it and run into issues, feel free to let me know. If you don't use it at all, let me know why. I want to make sure that myself or any others are producing things that are actually useful. I hope all of you give this a try. And so I ask all of you, please don't be the kind of person who says, I really would love more advice on my worlds and then doesn't go use this. Like, this is a way to get more context.